Hi everyone. I'm going to be giving a tutorial on how to make a ping pong game in CS Academy. So as you can see, I've made a file called ping pong in the sandbox IDE for on the CS Academy website. So before we get into the actual coding of things, let's first make pseudocode of the game so we can have a better understanding of what we need to make to actually program the game. So first thing that you would intuitively think of is that you need the ping pong paddles, a table, a ball, and a way to start the game. So we should first initialize game elements. Now, what do we need? We need to create a table with, I guess, a specific image at a given position and time. Size, sorry. And what else do we need? We need create paddles for two players on opposing sides, and maybe mirror images. Next, we need to create a start button and a position on canvas, on the canvas. And what else do we need? We need the ball to actually play ping pong. And we need to set a ball's initial speed and movement and direction. So when it gets hit, when it gets hit first, it'll have the direction and speed set. So set initial ball. All right. So this is all we can think of off the top of our heads for a game elements for a ping pong game. So first things first is that we probably need to handle the paddle movement. So what I want to do is that when my mouse is on the canvas, the paddle will follow the mouse's movement. And I'll probably split the canvas in half, have one side control the left side of the player, and the other side control the other player's paddle. So we can use CS Academy's defined on mouse move, which tracks the position of the mouse. And what does it do? If mouse X, which is the x-axis of the mouse, is left of the center of canvas, then you move first paddle to mouse Y position. Because think of it, we can think of it as a game of Pong, where wherever our mouse is, it just follows from the Y direction. So it can't move in the x-axis, but it can move in the y-axis. Because if we let it move in the x-axis, if we have a table, then we can make it so that the paddle can go over the table, which is not ideal for a game of ping pong. So next, we will do for the other side, which is if it's not left, so it has to be on the right in the else case. So we move second paddle to mouse Y position. Okay, now that our paddles can now move, we need a way to actually start the game. So we define a function for on mouse press, or on mouse press. And if the mouse click is on the start button, then you hide the start button, which will start the game. Great. So now we have our table, we have our function to move our paddles, we have a function to actually start the game. Now we want the ball movement, which is, I guess, the main part of the game. So what do we need? We have CS Academy's defined function on step, which for every, I think the default step is 30 steps per second. So for every step, this code will run. Everything that we write in on step will run. So we want to hide. So since starting the game is actually hiding the start button, we need to make it so that if the start button is not visible, then you start the game. I guess over here you also have to do it so that the paddles don't move if the game is not started. So if the start is not visible, then you do all of this. So how do we start the game? We can update the ball of the position of the ball to, I guess, the current speed and direction that we set up here so that it has some sort of momentum to get to one side first. So we can say update ball position based on direction and speed. And so I guess intuitively, the next thing we need to do is check if the ball has passed the paddle. If the ball has passed the paddle, that means the player has lost the current round. So I guess it could be if ball reaches left side or passes left side of table. I guess it's better to say left edge of table. Then what do? We increment player, second player score, and then we restart the game or restart the round. So as you can see over here, I introduced a new variable, player score. So we should add that up here. Set initial player one score and player two score. Great. So as you can see, this is not like a formal way to do it. You can always go back and add more things that you need when you're figuring out how to code this. So you can always, if you if you remember or realize that you need a variable that you didn't define before, you can just go back and define it over there. So now you restart the round and we say else if ball reaches right edge of table, which is already the else case. So I'm gonna put this in parentheses. Then you increment the first player score. Oops. And then restart the round. So just for clarification, let's say over here is the table. This side, the left side is player one and the right side is player two. If the ball gets off the edge of the table of the right side, then the first player gets a score and vice versa. So now that we have a way to actually win the game, how do we win a round? Sorry, how do we make sure they actually win the game? So we can say that if if the second player or if the first player score reaches, let's give it a value, like let's say out of 10, or I guess in this case we can do out of 7 because 7 is my favorite number. So our if first player score reaches 7, then what you want to do is you want to display first player as winner through label, and then you want to make start button visible because you want it to be able to restart the game once you win. And yeah, and if you really want to, you can also include a gray screen So you won't see the game anymore. You'll just see a gray screen and then say you win and then a restart button or a start button again. So you can restart the game and play again. So we can do this for the other player. If second player score reaches 7, then you display second player as winner. Make the start button visible again. And the optional make gray screen. Just to make it look a little bit better when you display the winning screen. So what we have now is we have a function where the player can play the player has a win condition, the player can start the game, and the player can move the paddle. So what we want is if we want another condition that if the ball hits the paddle, then you want the ball to reverse its direction and go towards the opposing player. So here, if the ball hits first player's paddle, or second player, sorry, this is a little bit low. Let me make some extra space. Then what you want to do is you want to reverse ball direction so it goes to the other player and increase ball speed. The reason why we increase ball speed is that if you keep hitting, like ideally in real life, if you play ping pong, if you keep hitting the ball back and forth, it'll get faster and faster. So that's what we did over here. Okay, so now we have the game logic over here for win condition and how the ball is hit. We have start the game and move the paddle. But one thing we need to do is restart the round, which we made over here, so that after every round the ball is reset and the players can start anew. So I guess every time you restart the game, we need to call a function. So up here, you can define it everywhere, but I think defining it here is good. Define function, restart. What do we need to restart when we restart the game? So to have a new template, we can just follow these, ideally. So we don't need to create the table because the table's already created. We don't need to create paddles because paddles are created. We don't need to make a start button again because the game is not over, only the round is. We don't need to create the ball again, but we do need to set it to its initial position over here. So what we have is reset ball position to the center of table. We should also reset the paddle position to initial values. So no player gets an edge over the other in whatever case. We need to reset the ball speed to initial values because over here, remember that we changed the ball speed if the ball hits either player's paddle. So we need to reset that too. And yeah, maybe if you want, we can make start button visible again just to pause the game and make sure both players are ready before they actually play the game. So yeah, now we have fleshed out the game logic for our ping pong game, and my friend will next implement this in actual Python code. Thanks for listening.
Okay, now that we have our pseudocode, let's start translating it into actual Python code. So the first thing we're going to do is to initialize our ping pong table, our paddles, and our ball. So we can have, okay, ping pong table. Table is equal to, I have gone ahead and pulled up the image link here. And then the table image, use the image function, 115, and then we can set the width of this to be equal to 400, for instance, and the height of this to be equal to 400 as well. If we run that, we'll be able to see our ping pong table here. Now let's initialize our paddles. So we're gonna have 2 paddles. So let's have paddle 1 is image a link, which I'm also pulling up here. And then let's rotate our paddle's angle so that it's slightly slanted, so that it looks something like that. Oh, it's a little too big. So let's put paddle 1 width is 75, paddle 1 height is also 75. That's much better. Now let's do paddle 2. So you can initialize it with the very same link. Sets the paddle 2's width to be 75 as well, and height to also be 75. So if we run it, we'll be able to see. Now let's initialize our ball. So for now, our ball can just be a circle with the fill of dark gray. If we run it, we have a ball in the center. The thing is, we need some attributes of the ball. So what we can do is to have a global variable for the direction of the ball, and let's denote it such that -1 means the ball is moving towards the left, and +1 means that it's moving towards the right. We also want some other global variables for the ball, such as the speed in the x coordinate and the speed in the y coordinate. So let's call these app.speedx and set it to 2 initially, and then app.speedy and set it to 1 initially. Now let's add some additional components to help us better keep track of player 1 and player 2's scores. So let's call these additional components. One of it is a play button, because we want to be able to restart the game once the game finishes. So let's add a play button, which is essentially a group of a rectangle. Let's give it these coordinates and a blue fill, as well as a label that just says start. The size 20 and fill as white. And there we have it, a start button. We also want to be able to keep track of each player's individual scores. So let's put these in separate labels in the top left and top right corners of the screen. Player 1 score is a separate label that starts at 0. And similarly for player 2 as well. Okay, and there we have it, player 1 and player 2 scores and their labels. Now let's think about how do we want to start the game, in a sense, the logic for starting the game. We can have a function that works on restarting the match, which essentially resets the ball position to be in the center of the screen every time, the paddle position to be in the center, and the speed of the ball to be the original speeds, and it also resets the play button to be visible so that players can actually hit it. So let's call it def restart. Set the ball's central x to be 200, which is the center of the screen, ball center y to be 200 as well, and paddle 1 center y coordinate to be 160. Paddle 2's center y to be 170. App.speedx, reset it to the original, which was 2, app.speedy, which is the original S1. And lastly, reset the play button to be visible. Okay, so now that we have our start button, we want to actually be able to start the game when we press on it, so that will depend on the onMousePress function. So let's do def onMousePress. It takes in the mouse X and mouse Y values. And if our play button is being hit by our mouse X and mouse Y values, then we will make it invisible. And the game will actually start. Now let's think about the game mechanics. We want to be able to move our pedals using our cursor. So we can use the onMouseMove function. Move pedals def onMouseMove. That takes in mouse X and mouse Y. So if our mouse X value is on the left of the screen, we want to be able to control the movement of pedal 1. But if our mouse is on the right of the screen, we want to control the movement of pedal 2. So let's use an if statement. If mouse X is less than 200, which means it's on the left of the screen, we want to change pedal 1's center Y coordinate to be following mouse Y. Else, we change pedal 2's coordinate instead. Now the problem is that we want this to happen only if the start button has been clicked, and that means the game has started. So we can do if the play button is not visible, that means the game has started. And it seems like there's been an error. It seems like a typo here. Flat button. If we start it, we're able to control the movement of the pedals. Finally, let's think about the actual game mechanics of moving the ball. Move ball. And for this, we can use the onStep function to animate the ball on every step. Def onStep. So we want to be able to move the center X and the center Y coordinates of the ball on every step. And a way to do that is to multiply the app.direction global variable with the app.speedx or app.speedy global variables respectively, because app.direction essentially determines whether or not the ball is moving to the left and top or is moving to the right and bottom, depending on whether it's -1 or +1. So let's do def onStep ball.centerx plus equals app.direction times app.speedx. And the same thing for center Y, plus equals app.direction times app.speedy. But we want this to happen only if the game has started, and that means the play button is not visible. So let's add an if statement. If the play button is not visible, then we want the ball to move on every step. So let's try that. And we see that our ball is able to move in one direction. However, how do we actually ensure that our pedal can hit the ball and the ball will move in the opposite direction? So let's introduce some mechanics for that. For hitting the ball, we can make use of the hit shape method. If ball hits the shape of pedal 1 or the ball hits the shape of pedal 2, then we want to change the direction of the ball to the opposite direction. So we can do app.direction times equals to -1. And something else we can add in to make it slightly spicier is to increase the speed of the ball every time you hit the ball. So let's do app.speedx plus equal to and app.speedy plus equals to 1. So if we run it, we should be able to have the pedals hit the ball. And we can see that the speed actually increases on every hit. Okay. Now, we need to be able to keep track of the scores, and for that we need to be able to check whether or not any player has scored. So the way to do that is, if the ball goes out of the screen on the left, for instance, then player 2 scores 1. If the ball goes out of the screen on the right, then player 1 scores 1. Let's introduce some scoring mechanics. If the ball's center X position is less than 0, which means that the ball goes out of the screen from the left, then we want to increment player 2's score by 1. So we can take player 2's score value. Remember that this is a string, so we want to convert this to an integer. Increment this by 1, and then convert the whole thing back to a string to store into this label here. And we want to restart the game so that we can start a new match, and that's called our restart function. Similarly, if the ball's center X position exits the right side of the screen, then now we want to increment player 1's score by 1. So we take player 1's score, convert it to an integer, add it by 1, and then convert the whole thing back to a string. So if we run it, we see that we should be able to have player 1's score. Oh, there's a little bug here because we forgot to actually restart the game. So let's add a restart, and let's try that again. Yeah. Okay, so that's how it should work. And lastly, we want to have some final mechanics for ending the game. So I think in a ping pong game, the first to 11 wins, but let's use 7 in this case. So game win, lose. If player 2's score is equal to 7, then we want to set the play button to be visible, which means that the game is over. And let's create a game over screen. So we can have a rectangle that spans the entire screen's width and height. Make it gray and make it slightly translucent. And let's have a label that says, okay, oh, the game is over and player 2 wins. And we can do something similar for player 1 as well. And this time player 1 wins. Alright, so let's run that, and I'll be playing a game against myself. Okay, so I just played a game against myself and basically won against myself. So here you can see the game over screen and the label as well. So that's how you make a ping pong animation. There are actually lots of things that you could do to transform this game into something a lot more sophisticated, to add some level of spice and complexity to it. One way to do that is to randomize the direction that your ball goes in, because right now it's only going from the top left to the bottom right corner, and that makes things pretty predictable. So a way to do that is to import Python's random module and maybe weigh the direction or the speed of the ball depending on using a randomly generated decimal. Yeah, but this is how you can make a very basic ping pong animation game, and we hope you enjoyed it. Thank you!